Warwickshire. Nikki Sinclaire is one of 7 MEPs who represent the West Midlands. She represents the We Demand a Referendum Now party. But there has been, until now, a great secret that Nikki never really shared with anyone other than her close friends and family, and which she writes about in her book, Never Give Up. She writes about it in detail, and for the first time, she'll talk about it. Nikki was born a boy. She joins me now, and it's lovely to have you with us again. We've spoken on a number of occasions,
Good morning, Annie.
always politically. So why have you chosen to write about your life now?
I think for a number, there was not one reason, but one of the reasons has been in the press that there were some veiled threats from my former party UKIP that they were going to divulge this in the upcoming European elections next year, and it was.
Why would they want to do that?
Well, I think that they obviously see me as a threat, especially in the West Midlands, because I've been by far the most active MEP that people, see on the streets, mobile. So the only one MEP in the whole country, and I've taken forefront of major issues here in the West Midlands, and I think they do see me as a threat to a UKIP MEP here in the West Midlands. So I think they wanted to somehow destabilise me, and it would. The nightmare thought of getting a phone call from a newspaper, whether it be The Sun, The Mirror, or whoever else, saying, we're going to run this story tomorrow, can we have a quote, please? And it'll be someone else telling my story. And I just really think that if this was going to be made public, and I thought at some point it would be, that some journalist would push this story, that I wanted to be in my own words, and that's why 7 months ago I decided to sit down and write this.
It was interesting because you do, though, in your introduction you say that I was afraid of ridicule,
yeah.
Or that my political views might not subsequently be taken seriously.
Yeah, I think that was the thing. I think one of the thoughts, because it did occur to me, and I was asked questions by journalists shortly after being elected, and I deflected the question, or honestly just said I denied the fact, because I thought that somehow anything I tried to do would be overshadowed by that. And one of the ideas of writing the book now is actually I can show I've got 4 years of a track record, and what a track record. I've actually achieved, and can point to, I could be here listing for 10, 15 minutes my achievements. The major thing about David Cameron forcing him to dispatch books of an EU referendum when he wanted to stop banging on about Europe. That was a huge achievement. UKIP didn't do that. I did that. I harnessed that campaign and forced David Cameron on that. And I think had this been out there then, I think somehow that I wouldn't have been taken seriously, and that would have been put before then.
And it would have always been, transgender MEP.
Yeah, although I'm not transgender.
No, but do you know what I mean? That's how the press would say it. Let's go back a bit, because was it always the case that you felt that something wasn't right, that there was a kind of mismatch between your biological sex and your sort of gender identity, if you like?
Yeah, from the age of 3, I realised there was something fundamentally wrong with me. Now, at the age of 3, I didn't understand what it was. I couldn't articulate it. It's only obviously later years that I realised that what was wrong. I began to feel as if I should have been a girl from probably the age of 5, that I could actually mentally disseminate the information or what I felt. But from the 3 of actually knowing there was something wrong.
You say, as young as 3 or 4, you would pray to Our Lady, God, Jesus, St. Anthony, that I would wake up a girl.
Yeah, so I was a devout Catholic.
Very strong Catholic family.
Very Irish Catholic family. And you believed that if you asked God or Our Lady or whoever, and if you were good, and I was good, that your prayers would be answered. So obviously you had the disappointment of waking up and them not being answered, but maybe they were answered, but just maybe later in life.
What were you like as a little boy?
I was always inquisitive. That was a major thing. I went out in the lorries with my dad. My dad was a lorry driver, and he would drive all over London, and I absolutely loved it. I was always asking about things, and what was that? What's that do? And so there was that, and very inquisitive about religion. I was very into religion as a child. But then always there's this fundamental problem, and then at the age of 7, something traumatic happened, which kind of overshadowed my problems with my gender and made me grow up. At the age of 7. And
this was your father having his accident?
Well, it wasn't an accident. He was pushed over a balcony in front of me, a 20-foot balcony.
And he fell literally in front of you?
Yeah, well, I was running to try to catch him.
For a gate, you wouldn't have... You'd have got there.
I'd have probably been killed.
Yeah.
He was about 22 stone, big, muscular guy.
Yeah.
And yeah, I thought he was dead, and that was very, very difficult time, traumatic for the whole family. I was the eldest of 4, so it was a huge amount of responsibility. I think I used the term in the book. I think that's when my childhood ended, because you had that whole time. My father was in hospital for months and months. We had to live in the same place, a few doors down to the man who did it. There was constant threats.
Do you know why the man did it? They were having an argument?
There was some type of argument that got out of hand. It was.
You were what, 7 or 8 years old?
7 years old. And my mother was just. My mother's a very strong woman, and Irish women are very strong women. And my grandmother was there also. But I even had to do some work, because I came down for breakfast one morning and I found my mum crying because there wasn't enough Weetabix to go around. So, I went out washing cars and trying to buy food. It forced me to grow up at the age of 7, which, although it's a very awful thing that happened, it did allow me to deal with some of my problems with gender much easier, because I was far more mature. Because
you'd grown up very rapidly, you'd had to.
Yeah.
I mean, you were at school, of course, as a boy. How were you fitting in at school?
I never fitted in school at all. Until the age of 14, but I just couldn't get school. I couldn't, when I first day at school, I was dressing up in the Wendy house in the old clothes, women's clothes. And
yes, you're right. The first thing as you arrived at school, you made a beeline for the Wendy house.
Yeah, and I would draw houses while the boys were drawing aeroplanes and cars. So that's natural. None of the teachers ever mentioned this to my parents, which is probably retrospectively amazing. But so it's obviously something very natural going on there, and. So my whole childhood was that, and when I grew up, I had my tooth. I was bullied at school. I had my tooth knocked out. At secondary school, which proved, I put in the book, proved the greatest thing ever.
Yes, because you went to London a lot.
I had to go to the orthodontics in London, King's College Hospital. Who had to rebuild and wire the
and you've got fabulous teeth now, can I just say?
Yes, I think that's the advantage of being able to afford that. But yes, it was terrible, obviously, the thing that happened. But it gave me a source of independence. And London, because I came from quite a very strong council estate in London, so it showed me, on my own, I was able to explore London. And London's an amazing place to be different in. You can submerge into London. You can be whoever you are in London.
And you did. You used that as an opportunity to experiment with makeup and clothes and stuff.
Yeah. Well, I was a big Adam Ant fan, so pot of Nivea, line across the nose, and it was a big new romantic. I was a really big new romantic. Sometimes even a pair of curtains over me, tight belted in, weird makeup, spider
Nobody took
makeup.
a blind bit of notice.
No, because that's how it was then. It was the big, that was the big look at the time.
Could you, through all of this period, Nikki, and you're going into your teens, could you talk to your family at all about this desire, of going to bed and praying that you'd wake up to be a girl?
No, I couldn't speak to my family or the priest, because for some reason, intrinsically, I knew that I couldn't talk about this. I could talk, through my religion to God directly, which was a source of comfort. But other than that, no, I just knew I couldn't speak to anybody.
What reaction would you have got from your family?
Well, there was, when the first time I realised that someone else had this was when my dad used to get the news of the world every Sunday, and there was a story, James Bond girl was a boy, talking about Caroline Cossey, and I was like, wow. There's someone else, which was a wow. And then I showed my dad, hey, Dad, look at this. And my dad's reaction was, oh, that's perverted, that's disgusting, pointing at my mother, that's a real woman, that gives birth and all of this type of thing. So it was, on one hand, it was a good thing. On the other hand, it put some very negative stereotypes in my head, which made me know that I couldn't discuss this with my parents. It's
Annie Othen with you. We're talking with West Midlands MEP Nikki Sinclaire, talking about her story of feeling forced to reveal that she underwent gender reassignment surgery. And we're talking about, you started experimenting with clothes, makeup and dressing up. But there was something when you were 14, you were sent to boarding school.
Yes.
You blossomed there, because up until that point you'd been skipping school, and who wouldn't want to be if you were being bullied or whatever. And that was a sort of revelation for you?
Yeah, it's because they couldn't deal with me. I couldn't fit in at school. I was self-educated. I would go to libraries and museums and educate myself. And perversely, the teachers were annoyed that I did well with exams after not turning up at their lessons. And I got caught one day on camera on the news in Downing Street.
Yes.
My parents caught me on television, and obviously there'd been a whole thing about me playing truant. And eventually the local authority decided to finance or pay for me to go to boarding school. And it was absolutely amazing. I learnt Shakespeare. I went to theatre for the first time, read so many books, Laurie Lee, To Kill a Mockingbird, amazing, Golding, Lord of the Flies.
It was just a revelation, not a world.
Absolutely.
Having said all that, you were still presumably struggling with your gender, with your identity. And at 16, at school, you learnt about an operation.
Yes, because I was very inquisitive and going to libraries, I learned to find out about books and so forth. And I... unfortunately, most of this was turned up with homosexuality, which this isn't. Unfortunately, most people think what I've gone through is some extension of sexuality. It has absolutely nothing to do with sexuality. It's a medical condition called gender dysphoria. But I came across this book, which, again, linked it with homosexuality and so forth. But it did say that there was an operation available. And I was like, wow.
Because you went to see your doctor?
As soon as I left 16.
At 16?
Because I'd known, been politically aware that it was about the contraception pill, and that under 16s parents were being notified. So I knew at 16 they couldn't. So as soon as I was 16, within a week of my 16th birthday, I went to see my doctor, who was incredibly unsupportive.
What did you say to your doctor?
I just said that the fact that I had all these feelings, that I had felt like I was a female and that I needed to do something about it. Naively, I thought that it could be done quickly. That was very naive, perhaps. But she just had very negative. She was like, oh, just grow up, pull yourself together. She
did tell you you'll grow out of it?
Yeah.
And was this the same doctor that said if you carried on like this, your life would be pretty awful, you would descend into drugs and prostitution?
Drug addiction and prostitution. Yeah, I'd end up in London on the streets. That's what she told me at the age of 16. And she didn't tell me to go away and come back and talk about this in 3 months. It was just go away and grow out this, which was, unbelievable. And it was like a thunderbolt. It was really awful to deal with that.
Because you were basically being told there was no hope, go away, and your life was going to pan out into something in the gutter.
Yeah, and because what people don't also understand is at that point I was pretending to be something I wasn't. Yeah, living a life as a male, I wasn't a male. To the outside world, I was, but that was me having to pretend every single day that I was something I wasn't. And I needed the treatment to be who I was. But I went to this help group, which was unhelpful, to be honest.
So you did try and seek support groups and so on?
Yeah, which were not that many in 1984.
No, that's true.
But I did find one which was a bit scary, to be honest, and I write about it in the book. I write about it in my prejudice at the time. I walk in and there was lots of what I seemed at the time. Bear in mind that was 16, men in miniskirts and all of this type of thing, and they were just drinking beer, and it was like, please God, I'm not like that. And so that was very scary. But there was someone there who did talk to me, and they gave me this number of this hospital in London. And then there was other people there telling me, oh, you don't want to do it, and it was very conflicting. But I did phone this number. It was Charing Cross Hospital. And I said, I'd like to come speak to somebody. And they said, okay, you need a letter from your doctor. And I thought, oh. Well, maybe I could get another doctor. And then they said, we'll just take your name and address and we'll look out for it. So my name and telephone number. And I gave them, not my date of birth. I gave them my date of birth. And they said, sorry, we can't see you until you're 21.
And how old were you then?
16. And 5 years at that age is like a life sentence. I couldn't imagine another 5 years like that.
So what was going through your mind at that point?
At that point, I don't remember even ending the call. I was so upset. I mean, that physical feeling of a lump in your throat that you can't get out a word. It was like that. It was just awful. I just didn't see, after what the doctor had said, after being to that group, I didn't see black. That's all I could see. is black. Everything, life being black. And then somehow, some way, that you just move on. And that's probably what I've done throughout my life. What tends to happen with bad things that happen, even the most recent things, I tend to kind of get stunned, feel sorry for myself, not know what to do for a day or so. And then all of a sudden I'm like, right, okay, I'm going to deal with this. How am I going to deal with this? And that's what happened with that situation.
MEP is with me talking about her life, which is now in her book, Never Give Up, standing tall through adversity. And you are tall. How tall are you?
6'6".
6'6". You had to wait until you were in your 20s to get a diagnosis.
Well, until as soon as I was 21, I was back at a different doctor.
Scorch marks on the carpet, straight in there.
Absolutely, and I got an appointment, and it was an amazing thing, to be able to talk about it, and then a professional to understand and say, well, you're not weird, you're not freak, this happens. And as I said earlier, this is a medical condition, and there's been some, research done on deceased male to female transsexuals where they've obviously taken the brain out, and they found to be the brain to be similar to that of female. So it's basically having the brain of one gender and the body of another.
And then that's how you would describe yourself?
Absolutely. Because, inside me, everything I am is female, and it has been ever since I've known about myself, from year dot 3, whenever. But obviously, physically, I grew up as a male, and that was the conflict. Yeah,
and there was the difficulty. You had a first operation, I think, in Hove. Is that
That's right?
Yeah, your first one, and that was for
the breast augmentation.
Yeah, and that was okay. And lo and behold, you went and Blimwell had a car accident.
Yeah, almost killed myself. A head-on collision with a coach. Yeah. And
how did you were going through all of this, and then and you didn't have your seatbelt on either because you just had the breast surgery.
That's right. So you were advised not to wear a seatbelt for a period of time. But because I was so tall, I didn't go through the windscreen. What actually happened was my top of my nose, this bit here, went straight onto the steering wheel.
So you had to have your nose rebuilt?
Yeah, well, the top, it's called craniofacial. It's this bit here. It's just above. I'm pointing on radio. Yeah.
It's between her eyebrows and above her nose.
Yeah, so it isn't the nose. It's the top. It's that bit there.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. But you pulled through all of that. You then went to, I think it was Charing Cross, and it was there that you very seriously started to undergo treatment.
Yes, and ultimately having the surgery there, which was great. Becoming me, although I always was me. I mean, that's, sometimes as the media says, oh, have an operation. Some people have this idea it's like a revolving door, that you go in the hospital one way and you come out. That really is not the case because, you're living as a woman for a long time beforehand, and, I had a job and supported myself, etc., etc. And then after, the operation, there were complications with the operation, and a lot of people die with this operation.
Yeah, you could get a heart attack or something, couldn't you?
Absolutely, but I had complications. I couldn't feel my lower body for 24 hours. And they had to wake me up every 20 minutes to take all my vital signs. And then you're in bed for a week. And then they sent me home. And then I developed deep vein thrombosis and a pulmonary embolism, which for the second time in a couple of years almost killed me. And so to deal with that, after everything I had been through, to then almost die a couple of times.
How did you sort of interpret all of that? Because obviously you come from a very strong Catholic upbringing as well.
Yeah.
That, you go down this path, a very difficult and traumatic at times, stressful, hard path, both physically and mentally. And then it's almost as you get to the final point where you can open the door and go, ta-da! Something else then just knocks you down. And in this case, DVT.
Yeah, and that seems to be the case for my whole life.
Yeah.
Everything seems to happen, and I seem to have to, overcome something, which is why the title of the book is Never Giving Up, because I seem to be having to climb a hurdle of some sort. And I just, again, going back to the thing, I kind of feel very sorry for myself and then realise I have to do something. But on that time, it took a very long time. I sunk into an awful depression. For about a year. I had some damage done to my left leg from the DVT, and I could hardly walk for quite a while. And that was very difficult. Doctors prescribed me antidepressants, which I refused to take. I got the packet of tablets and they were there, and it was almost like, well, you can take one of these and you give over your life to something else, or you keep control of your life. So no matter how bad it got, I never took one of those tablets. I always kept control.
Where were your family throughout all of this? Had you told them at this point?
Oh, of course. Years before the surgery, I think I told them about the age of 21.
How did your father, big macho man that he was?
He found it very difficult. The car crash helped him change his mind. Because I almost died, and at the end of the day, blood is thicker than water, and I was still his child.
Yes.
And I now have an incredibly close relationship with all my family. I have 13 nephews and nieces.
And they all accept who you are?
Absolutely. I all do help them with their homework. I take them to football matches. I do all the kind of things with them, and then I can hand them back.
Has it all been worth the struggle?
Absolutely. Absolutely, because I'm me. And I think that's the big thing, the ability of me to wake up every morning. And prior to writing this book, I hadn't thought about it, because we're talking 22 years plus ago, all of this happening. And I didn't think about this, and it's amazing you don't think about this at all, because I'm living an ordinary life. And when I wake up in the mornings now, I think about, what am I going to do today? What's on the agenda, whether it be Sky Blues here, or, it's the EU referendum, or it's food banks that I deal with, or debt, the American travels, whatever it is, whatever the focus is of that day, that's my main thoughts. I don't think about myself.
Still misunderstood, though. What understanding did you get from your party, UKIP, and the leader of that party, Nigel Farage?
Well, this was never an actual issue within the party. It was never discussed. But they obviously...
you never said anything to
No, well, I did tell Mike Nattrass, who here in the West Midlands in 2004.
You told him about your medical history?
Yeah, because there was an article in the Sunday Express... Sorry, so the Sunday Telegraph, which kind of alluded to it, but didn't go far enough, really. But so I thought, well, I was going to work for him as his political advisor, so I thought I should tell him. But there was always this kind of uncomfortableness in UKIP, and there was
kind of uncomfortableness.
Well, with Farage, he always seemed to want to push me out, push me away. They tried to get rid of me in 2001. They removed me from the NEC, and I had to go to the High Court to get absolutely just blatant, no good reason to remove me. And I represented myself in the High Court and won, and was put back on the NEC. And then, I fought and worked hard, and I became an MEP, was elected in 2009. And I later found out that Nigel Farage had told everyone that he wished I hadn't been elected, that he'd rather had 12 MEPs than 13. Which, when you hear that from your leader, that's not a nice thing, is it?
Obviously, he's not here to answer that.
No,
having said that, did you approach him as to why he felt like that?
I could never have a proper conversation with him.
Why not?
He seems to actually, although he's an amazing communicator, and everyone will know that he's an amazing communicator when he's on television, he finds it very difficult to speak to people on a one-on-one basis. And I'm not the only person, that's fallen out with Farage. If I was the only person, I'd be looking to myself. But he's had 18 different MEPs elected since 1999, and he has fallen out with 10 of those. 10 out of 18 he has fallen out with. So he does have a difficulty in communicating with people on a one-to-one basis.
You now represent the We Demand a Referendum Now party. Do you feel that you now have the freedom politically to do and say what you want?
Yes, I do. The name of the party says it all. The issue of the EU referendum is on the table. David Cameron says, well, we may have won in 2017 if he was to win a general election, and if this and if that, and if they get renegotiation. Well, renegotiation is not realistic, because the thing that people really want renegotiated is, for example, the border control. They want laws that come out of the European Court of Justice. They don't want that. That is fundamental changes within the EU, and you have to get unanimity in that. So all other 27 countries, including an Ireland in referendum, would actually have to happen for that renegotiation. That simply is not going to happen. He's been told by all the leading European politicians that that's not going to happen, but he's going along with this pretense. My argument is, even if you're pro-European, let's have this referendum now, or not now, tomorrow, as in within a year. and then we can grasp the nettle and decide which way, once and for all, are we going to go. I think this uncertainty is awful, because even if you listen to the most pro-European argument, which I disagree with, that most of our investment into this country is dependent on our membership of the EU, if that is the case, and I say I strongly deny that, that's going to be affected with the uncertainty of 3 or 4 years, of not knowing whether we'll be a member 3 or 4 years. So who would invest in us if you have a huge period of uncertainty? So I argue, even to the most pro-Europeans, well, if you want, make your case. Yeah, I'm out there, every week making the case of why we should leave the EU and why we should have a referendum. Where are the pro-Europeans? Where's our pro-European MEPs? And there are pro-European MEPs in this region. Where are they making the case?
How do your own colleagues in Europe react to you? Because you are very physical, you are 6 foot.
I don't think that really matters.
But you are a very physical presence, aren't you? And people must...
People can be, some of the most... you can have a physical presence at 4'5".
Yeah.
Seriously, you can.
Yeah.
I don't think that really makes a difference, to be honest.
But how do they react to you? I suppose the point I'm getting at is that do they understand what your history has been, and does it make a fig of difference to them or not?
I don't know, and it doesn't make a fig of difference to me what they think. I'm here to. I don't go there to get on with other politicians. I go there to represent the people of the West Midlands. I'm not going there to be liked. I'm going there to put the case for the West Midlands, and I do more than any other West Midlands MEP. In an independent assessment, I'm ranked 179th out of 766, the highest ranking West Midlands MEP. I do a good job there, and I'm the only one here in the West Midlands that is proactive, and people can actually meet me out in the street, not at election time, throughout these 4 years that I've been MEP.
I suppose the point I'm getting at is that you are a presence, and you are sometimes a thorn in people's side.
Absolutely, because that's what people want. I think people are annoyed by these plastic politicians who seemingly go there for career. I'm there, I'm a conviction politician, and there's very few conviction politicians there. I'm not afraid to say what I believe. That's probably why it makes it difficult for me that I'm not in any party, because I don't fit into any of the parties.
But there's a strength and a weakness in that, isn't there?
I think there is. I mean, obviously, yes. If you're a part of the main party, you've got much more levers of power. That's true. But I actually think in protest politics is a very useful tool. The fact that I can say anything. You have Conservative MPs who can only defy the party whip so much. Ultimately, they have to fall into line. And we all know about political parties and lobbyists and so forth. I'm not answerable to anybody else. I'm answerable only to my employers, the people of the West Midlands.
It's very interesting, a text that came through here, and it comes from Jez, actually, in Stoke, who says, I've only ever heard Nikki on your programme, because we've spoken before, and she's a good politician doing an extraordinary job. She says what she thinks, she voices the views of the common man, she's forthright, and that's fantastic. It's a terrible thing if Nikki has felt she has to reveal details about her private life. If she didn't want to, your private life is your private life and should stay that way. He believes it's a terrible thing that you feel you've had to reveal it.
Yeah, and I never wanted to, really. It's 4 years in as being elected as an MEP, and I've shown what I can do. And ideally, I would have never, because this isn't, as I say, it's not sexuality. I've been quite open about my sexuality. That I'm in a lesbian relationship, and I explain that in the book how that all came about.
You have a partner.
I have a partner, but what I've had to divulge in this book is my medical history, and that is an awful situation to have done.
Finally, Nikki, what do you think would have happened to you if you hadn't pursued your need to be a female?
I can't think of where that would have been, because I don't think I'd have been an MEP, or I don't think I'd have had a professional career. I do honestly believe I'd have still been in that counsellor state, probably on some type of medication to deal with all the anxiety. I consider myself to be a productive member of society. I certainly wouldn't have been had I not received this treatment.
Do you think you'd still be here?
I've never been suicidal. But many people do commit suicide with this condition.
That's why I asked.
Yeah, many people do. And I can't remember what was I saying, the line that, the loneliness, the rejection, the ridicule, and all of those things can be a lethal combination of stuff. And we don't know really the figures, because you don't know, people's private lives. But I've known of situations where people just can't deal with it anymore.
Another text here. Good morning, Annie, and also your guest. So this is from Howard. I suspect I'm like many who, because I've never had any gender issues, will never really understand what drives folks to surgery, only to try to respect and accept. However, I don't think it right when a politician crosses the floor and stays on. It's more honourable to resign and put up for re-election in your new party without proof of an outing threat to blame UKIP. It sadly seems political in itself and demeans Nikki's situation and openness in telling her life story. That's from Howard. Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, first of all, the way the European Parliament works, it's not like how Westminster, you can't resign and force a by-election. That mechanism actually isn't there, so it's number one. And UKIP can't argue because they've obviously had defections from the Conservative Party, so they can't, you know, they've got MEPs who weren't elected as UKIP, so they can't argue that point. You know, obviously, had I wrote this book and not talked about UKIP, people would be wondering why I didn't talk about UKIP. I've been very honest about my situation with UKIP, and there's also some parts in there that are very nice about Nigel Farage in the book. There are, you know, he was very nice to me on a traumatic occasion. So I have to write honestly, and I've wrote honestly. UKIP have been incredibly nasty to me in recent years. I've had cause to complain to them.
In what
way? The attitude of some of their staff, the comments of their staff and an MEP. I've had cause to complain to the President of the European Parliament, who's had to take action against some of their staff. Obviously, for legal reasons, I can't name the actual staff.
Please don't.
Obviously, I understand that. But, you know, it has been awful, and I've had to get on with my work over that. And that, for example, even that 100,000 signature petition that I forced David Cameron's hand on me, Farage didn't want to sign that, and he was belittling me about that and tried to claim all the credit afterwards. Well, UKIP, why didn't UKIP do that? You know, they had 12 MEPs. Why couldn't they? They could have probably done it much faster, and they didn't.
Two final points, Nikki. We have to ask you while you're here about your views on Sky Blues, because obviously you've been very vocal.
Yeah.
Where do you see the future for the Sky Blues?
Well, obviously the judicial review was allowed to be heard on Friday. Now, I'm hoping that was some impetus to get the sides around the table, because what I've always called for is for the two sides to speak. I've met all the players in this. You know, the Hicks Trust, all of them, except for Anne Lucas. She's the only person that's not met me, but that's not a problem as long as she's speaking. But the feedback that I'm getting, that the council are not engaging in talks properly. They say they want to talk, and when they get to the talks, they are changing the agenda to what the pre-agenda's been. So, and that's a huge issue, because the council are spending an absolute fortune on PR saying one thing, and they're actually doing a complete different thing.
What do you think the council are doing?
I don't think Peter Hugerson, who's part of the Higgs Trust, said Anne Lucas is irrelevant in this. That he actually said that to my face. He said that Anne Lucas is absolutely irrelevant. She doesn't make the decision on this. Now, she's saying she wants to meet Joyce Apollo. I know they have met, but the terms were changed by the time she got in the room. And Joy, who I have met once a couple of months ago, says that she's there for the long term. Now, I'm not pro-Sisu or pro-Otium. I'm pro-football fan, because I am a football fan. I'm not a Coventry fan. I'm a Liverpool and Wimbledon fan, and I'm very pro for the benefit. And I don't want to see Coventry City outside the region or outside the city. I want to see them back in Coventry. But that's only going to happen if all sides fall into line. And you know, I'm not an apologist for Sisu, because I think they've made huge mistakes over the years, but the council are not helping the situation. And I think this investigation into how they've used taxpayers' money, and there's European money there as well, I think that it's going to throw up some huge stories.
Where do you see the outcome?
Well, hopefully this may be an impetus to all sides saying, look, we've done wrong, let's get to a table and discuss this. You've got an empty stadium there. And if that empty stadium cannot survive an empty stadium, you look throughout the world. Boris knows it about London and putting West Ham in the Olympic Stadium. If you look at Los Angeles, the Olympic Stadium, when the LA Raiders left there, the stadium went to rack and ruin. And you're talking Los Angeles. Yeah? You cannot have a stadium without a team. And I know they've desperately been trying to get other teams, and so far they have failed, you know, rugby, etc. We need the Sky Blues back in the Rico. There's no need to build anywhere else. We've got a perfectly good stadium there. But it has to be a viable commercial option. And to starve a football club of its funds, which is what ACL were doing, is dangerous. A football club needs all its funds because it needs that to buy players. And ultimately, we want Coventry City back in the Premiership. And you need to fund the club in able to be able to do that.
That's Sky Blue's future. What about your future, Nikki Sinclair? You've written in detail about your past in Never Give Up, but where do you see your future?
There is obviously a chapter right at the end about the future, but I'm standing for election next May, 22nd of May, for this We Demand a Referendum Now, to give the people an alternative. Those people who don't want to leave their permanent, because I'm not going to stand in the general election under this banner, I'm only going to stand in the European election. It's a one-off election that people can lend me their vote, that if they vote Conservative or Labour, they can send a message to Miliband and Cameron, actually we want a referendum on the EU. And if they re-elect me, they know they've got somebody who's been a fierce fighter for the West Midlands, who's out there representing them.
You wouldn't want to stand in UK elections, be a member of Parliament?
Well, in the future,
ultimately, that's
yes,
where you'd like to be.
Ultimately, because I would like us to leave the EU and make myself redundant with all the other MEPs who are a waste of taxpayers' money. Exactly. So I'd be looking for another job. So ultimately, one day I would like to be a member of Parliament, because that was always my ambition. I was born opposite Houses of Parliament, so I would love to be there, because I think I would do a good job as a constituency MP for where I don't know, but I think I would be a really good constituency MP. So that's ultimately my ambition. But right now, I think it's trying to force this EU referendum. I don't think we can trust the Conservatives. I've shown that I can do more tangibly than UKIP have done, and I think that people can vote for me in next year and not damage their parties because the way UKIP would damage their parties.
Nikki Sinclair, thank you very much indeed for talking.